I really
Hey, how are you?
enjoy meetings with John did a good job when he subbed for that one time. Very impressive.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm going to open the June 12th, 2025 meeting of the Lexington Planning Commission. So the first item on our agenda is approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any comments, questions, thoughts? Then I'll entertain a motion in a second.
I approve the agenda for June the 12th.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, and motion carries. Next item is approval of the minutes. Hopefully we all had time to review them. I thought they looked very complete. Does anybody have any comments or concerns? Okay, then
So if we approve the minutes as printed.
I second that.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and opposed? And the motion carries. Okay, next item is citizens' comments on matters that are not on the agenda. If anybody in our audience, welcome everybody. If anybody has a comment that they would like to make on something that is not on our agenda tonight, I welcome you to come up to the podium. And seeing as there are none, I'm going to close that section of the agenda and move on to new business. Our first item of new business is CUP 2025-05, an application by Total Action Against Poverty in Roanoke Valley for approval of a conditional use permit to allow a daycare center to operate in the garden level of the Lexington City Schools office at 300 Diamond Street, tax map number 17-1-135B. Which is owned by Lexington City Schools. Arnie, do we have a staff report?
Indeed. Good evening, everyone. We do have a request for a conditional use permit for daycare center. Their property is in the R1 zoning district, and a daycare center is obviously a conditional use, and that's what they're asking for this evening. Just a little bit of background, since we have our youth services program there, and Tammy's retiring, and that portion of the building will be vacated. And they do have something similar, but it is different enough that I require there to be a conditional use permit. So the currently students are in there. I can't remember their ages, but there's an after school program, and also there's a summer portion of that youth services. But what TAP is proposing to bring over from Waddell, they're younger kids, longer hours of operation, and therefore I thought it necessary to come forward with a conditional use permit. And also, not only do we need to follow our own rules, but if there's even a question, it's even more of a reason for us to come, or owners, property owners, public, to come forward and request a conditional use permit. So that's why there's a request for conditional use permit and for your consideration this evening. We do have on the bottom of page 6, sort of the aerial photograph there with the location map. And you see the main entry point is off of Maury Street, and that is the school board office building. And this is again in the lower portion of that building. TAP does have their current program over at Waddell. If I remember, the nice write-up that's in your report from the school is that they currently, I think, have one room for 20 students, and this would actually allow them to double. And I do have one clarification to make. I read the narrative incorrectly that Jason provided, and I thought it was a maximum of 20 students. But it's actually a request for 2 rooms for 20 each. So if you would revise what you have in front of you for 40 students, and I think Jason will provide you a little bit more clarification on that. Luckily, that was not included in the advertisement. It was an advertisement for a daycare center, not a daycare center with 20 students only. So luckily, we can go forward this evening with this public hearing because the ad was still correct. I just needed to correct the record in that I read the narrative incorrectly. It's not 20 maximum. It was 20 maximum per each of the 2 rooms that are available. So they are proposing those 40 students aged 2 to 5 years who will operate Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. And they would like to start here at the beginning of the 2025-2026 school year. There's a drop-off pickup for children in the front parking lot, in the front entrance, and staff will park in the gravel lot that's sort of up and behind the building. Additionally, there are federal regulations that require them to have a separate fenced playground area. And because of the timeline, I'm not even sure if they've started yet, but they are going to start on this before getting their approval, which isn't always the best look. But for them to meet their deadline to be able to operate beginning middle of August, I think it is, they have to go ahead and start and take the chance on moving the playground that is required for the daycare center from Waddell over to the location at 300 Diamond Street. Again, you will probably see that before, at least some of the progress for that before they actually get an approval from City Council. Over on the next page, which is page 8 of your packet, you do see a future land use map. So their designation is a civic campus post designation, which is what you would expect for a school facility. On the bottom or lower portion of that page, we give you the general residential district, sort of the intent for that particular zoning district, also the definition of daycare in case it's helpful. And then on page 9, you have your conditions for issuance. So these are your criteria. You're well familiar with these. I would ask that you utilize these criteria in your discussion and your decision making. As an example, the first one says the proposed use will not affect adversely the health and safety of persons residing or working in the neighborhood or the proposed use. And perhaps to put a little bit more color on the third one, C, proposed use will not be in conflict with the policies and principles of the city's adopted comprehensive plan. And we're just pointing out there that there is a specific comp plan strategy in your local economy section, which is LE 1.2, that does encourage the development of safe, affordable, quality childcare. Going over to page 10, if you don't mind, the staff recommendations. Again, if you could, in number 1, strike out 20 and write in 40 for consideration. I did realize earlier today that our condition number 2, which says the daycare center shall operate primarily between 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. with only occasional activities outside of those hours. We did not write in the days. So if you wanted to put in Monday through Friday, because again, I think that's in their narrative, feel free to do that. I'm going to ask you to perhaps flip over to page 14. Jason provided this description of the proposal. I'm not sure there's anything more to highlight there, just to make you aware that that is the request that was submitted. Looking over the next few pages, just to give you an idea of what the current playground facility is that will be coming over to this location. And then on page 20, sort of photograph of the front, and that green grassy area to the right of the main entrance is the area proposed for the playground. And then sort of more plan view on the next page. We did have comments from a property owner. I believe Mr. Zitmore lives right across the street. And beginning on page 23, you have his written comments mainly about parking, pickup, and drop off. And then over on the next page, sort of where he was pulling from the proposal, and then sort of additional ideas graphically on the next 2 pages of how those might be addressed. I think that's all I have. Happy to answer any questions.
I have a quick question. Did you just say that that was your suggestion of how the parking could be addressed?
Mr. Zitmore is
Okay.
from the comments that he made. That's the submittal that he provided.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Arnie?
The playground equipment that's in the pictures, it's moving from Waddell over there, so it will no longer be at Waddell, is that
Correct.
correct?
That is the playground that is not part of the additional playground that will stay at Waddell. It's just the portion of that I think is completely separate and fenced in.
Fenced in.
It has nothing to do with the more open
Okay.
playground.
Understand.
And I'm not sure whether to ask you or the applicant about the playground and the size of the playground. So I've been writing on everything in my notes, 1,500 square feet, but it's actually 3,000 square feet of playground space. And I'm just wondering if that actually is, yeah, okay. Okay. Anybody else have any questions for Arnie? Okay. Do we have an applicant statement? And if you'll come up to the podium and state your name and address for the record. And if you could speak into the microphone, that would be helpful.
I'm Jason White with Lexington City Schools. My work address is 300 Diamond Street, obviously. Thank you all. It's been quite a while since I've been before the planning commission. I think the last time was during COVID and everyone had masks on. I think it's important to note that TAP Head Start during the reconstruction of the Harrington Waddell Elementary School was in this location previously. Their playground was in the same area. Don't know how much background you need with that. Honestly, the biggest reason is we've run out of space at Waddell Elementary School. And when this space became available, we started brainstorming uses for it and thought that this would be wonderful to be able to not only provide what we feel like is probably a better location for TAP Head Start, but also to give us some more room in Harrington Waddell. And then working with the staff from TAP Head Start, when they mentioned to us, is there any way we could do 2 classrooms and expand our service to the community, knowing the great need there is in this area for childcare, affordable childcare. We were all on board with that, and they've been very easy to work with. Very good partnership going that, and actually, I don't know, Arnie, they did start yesterday with installing playground and all, and we know that there's a chance that we have to rip it out and take it back, but that's something that we need to do in order to make sure the licensing is taken care of in time. So not sure what else you need from me, but I'm happy to answer any questions, and I believe we have some folks from TAP Head Start here as well, if you have more specific questions of them as well. If there's anything I can't answer, I will turn to them. So.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. It seems like a worthy project, but if you'll stay there for just a second, does anybody have any questions for?
I was wondering, it's not important, but what's gonna go where the playground is moving from?
So prior to my tenure in the role I'm in now, it was a sticking point of where they put that playground because it's at the end of the back fire lane at Waddell. I don't want to speak for the TAP Head Start folks, but I don't think they were very happy with that location either. When I took on my current role as director of operations, I was not happy with that. The decision was made by a prior administration. Honestly, I think our fire marshal and our city emergency folks will be extremely happy that there is access now to go down the fire lane to get onto the ball field area and the playground area. So nothing's going to go there. There's already grass and straw there. There will be some green space there that will provide a lot better access for emergency vehicles and, other construction vehicles, things like that of Public Works. So,
I think the only other question I have is, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the bus at the end of the day at Lilburn picks up behind, so like in between the 2 buildings. Is that
Yes.
going to change because of?
So the great thing with moving to our center is they're able to expand their hours and go until 4. All bus activity will be over with by the time they do their dismissal. So, and we have already discussed with staff multiple times different ideas of the morning drop off and the afternoon pickup. We know that's, going to be an area that we're going to have to work through. We're going to be very flexible. And I've already told them I'm going to volunteer the first 2 or 3 weeks of the school year myself to stand out there and help with the flow. And, we brainstormed some things, nothing official yet. We have even thought about bringing traffic around Lewis Street and down back up to Maury, bring them in the back way so that then it doesn't spill out onto Diamond Street and kind of stage traffic there on Maury Street, heading back, I guess, north, if you will.
I think you guys see, I know you know how much of a headache that like little strip is for like 10 minutes a day. So I appreciate that you're thinking through all those. Like I have no doubt that you guys will like come up with a solution for that. But I'm
Honestly,
glad
I
you're
know,
thinking about it.
for the residents in that area, it will be different. It will be new. But for the folks who have been at Waddell that are in that nightmare, it's actually going to be much less congested for the TAP Head Start parents. What they're used to right now, it will help with some congestion there. What I think is probably a little bit more constricted roads and entrances and all.
And if you're taking them in the back way, that would be coming towards Waddell. You'd drop them off across the street. Is that?
So no, they would be coming back toward not Waddell, but
Sorry.
yes.
Yes.
So what we're talking about, and we want to try this obviously, and we're going to work with their staff, is they would be coming back down toward Diamond Street.
Yeah.
And unload from the driver's side of the vehicle.
So you'd have to have a crossing guard or.
Yeah, well, they're going to have staff out there. They've already committed to having a lot of staff out there, especially early on. By their bylaws, I believe you all have to have staff to take children out of cars and put them, make sure they're safely back in. So there will be plenty of staff there, and I'm going to volunteer myself as well.
So are you the person to then ask about the playground? You said the construction has already started, the size of the playground.
It's the same size, and you all please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe their federal guidelines, they have to have 75 square feet per child.
Mhm.
The area the playground is going into, with each classroom, I believe they will only be able to take out one classroom at a time, so their day will have to be staggered. I think the area might be close enough to get them all out there, but I believe they've already committed they don't want all of their kids by their regulations. One class would use the playground at a time while the other class was still inside.
Okay, so the regulation is actually a number of square feet per children who are using the playground at that moment, not how many are enrolled.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
And so 1,500 square feet is that number, and you all have that amount?
Okay. It's Crystal Burnett, I think is how, she is their operations person. She and I have been communicating mostly. She has a state conference. She's out of town right now, couldn't come, so she sent these wonderful folks to pinch hit for her. But yes, I believe that is correct, what she has told me as well.
And do you know if they're going to be taking down like the shrubs? And I noticed that there are lots of sort of greenery, and is it all just the grass? Great. Does anybody else have any questions? And how about parking, since that did come up as an issue?
So their staff is going to park in the back gravel lot.
Right,
And that
but-
area in front of the building will be open. During the normal drop off and dismissal, I don't believe we'll be utilizing that as much. I think that'll be more for when parents come during the day to pick up a child or this or that. I believe the way we're talking about doing it is they'll come down the road and kind of pull into that area, but not really pull in, if that makes sense, so that they're still pointing in the right direction to keep the flow of traffic so they don't have to turn around and come back out.
So I don't know if you all saw that. So you're not talking about changing the curb cut. Is that correct?
I believe that was the resident who mentioned
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
You know, I don't want to speak out of turn, but, and certainly I don't know that where the funds would come from that. I don't think that is a bad idea long-term.
Yeah.
I do think that would be something long-term to maybe consider moving that curb and providing a lane there. I don't know how quickly that could happen, but I do think that might be a long-term project that we would be willing to at least
Okay.
discuss.
So I'm just, I mean, how many parents tend to pick their kids up at, off hours? Actually,
I'm sorry, yeah.
Are you talking about doing a normal pickup or drop off? Or are you talking about like middle of
No,
the day
like
coming to?
during the middle of the day.
During the middle of the day, probably none.
And actually, if you would state your name
My
and
name is Melissa Preston. I'm the supervisor of education for TAP Head Start, Early Head Start, and Child Care Partnerships, and I reside in Roanoke, Virginia.
great, thank you so much. So here's what we are all looking at. This is a map that shows,
May I approach?
yeah, please, of course. It shows an area. I'm just trying to figure out where this one.
Last page.
So we're just looking at this area along. Is that where you're talking about people sort of pulling over
So,
along the street? Yeah.
yes, well, above that, if that makes sense. May I
Yeah.
approach?
Yeah, please.
I think we were talking about bringing folks in around.
Yep.
And they would be staging down through here on
Mhm.
this side of the road where they can easy access right here.
So they would just come in here, or
Correct.
you said not pull
I
in?
don't believe we would, I mean, we're gonna have to, it's gonna be some trial and error. I believe we would want to pull like two cars in, like parallel the road where they could then unload and then just go straight out. So there's a little more efficient.
Well,
Just over and not
yeah.
be able to continue on to get in.
Is
Certainly welcome though.
is there that's not a one-way street, is it? Okay, well, I wish you luck.
Work in progress, and we're committed to making it work. I can tell you that. That's,
Yeah,
you know, operations, that's logistics, that's a good part of my job and
Yeah.
always trying to watch and try to find better ways, more efficient ways to make the flow of traffic go during those busy times of day.
Right.
Maybe
Well,
it's-
and yeah, I'm just curious, since we had somebody who's a neighbor who was asking about this, I just wanted to sort of make sure that we talked about it a little bit. So,
And our goal is to talk to the parents and let them know as well, once we know who's gonna attend the program, let them know, okay, this is our expectation. This is what the flow of traffic should look like at drop off and pickup. So they will already be aware of our expectation as a program.
right.
And that's not
you.
uncommon. We, at Waddell, there's 2 lanes for drop off, and we have asked the TAP Head Start parents for 9 years since the school opened to stay in the right lane in the mornings if they get there before all the other traffic is, and they follow, they do well. They move to the right so that parents can get by. So I don't know. Ms. Anderson.
It's like perfectly choreographed. It's great. But you don't realize it's not fun when you're the one stuck in that lane, not realizing why it's not moving, but you figure it out pretty quick.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Okay, and now we will open the floor to public comment on this particular issue. So if we have any members of our audience who would like to make a comment about this, I would ask you to come up to the podium and state your name and, yeah. State your name and address, please.
Philip Welch, and my shop is at 209 Diamond Street. That's why I got the letter. So I'm right across the street from there. And all I would say is I can't imagine a better use for the space or a better thing to be going on there. Whatever's going on there now is obviously very successful. Those kids have a great time. Whoever the young adults are that work with them seem, extraordinary. Is that corner there, is that where the playground's going to be? Corner of Diamond and Morley? Where the kids play now? Actually. Okay, but that's the area. That's where they play. So I think having a fence there anyway is a great idea because the kids play ball. I can't tell you how many times I've run and caught a ball down there and thrown it back. So I think that's a good idea. Anyway, I'm delighted that you bothered to ask my opinion, but my opinion is that I can't, that's great. I'm not worried about the congestion, and if a parent needs to park in front of my shop for a while to pick up a kid, I have no problem with that. So, I have a little space there between my little driveway and the next driveway that's perfectly available. And I'm really not worried about congestion. If you want congestion, just drive out on Route 11 or Route 60. Ruin everything with, stupid development and no planning. That's all the congestion you need. Have some kids and some parents, no problem.
Thank you so much. I
Okay,
appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
Gotta go.
Bye. Okay, well, I'm gonna, is there anybody else who would like to make a comment from the public? Okay, so I'm gonna close the public comment section and open the floor for commission discussion. And so does anybody have any concerns, thoughts? Are we ready for a motion?
I move we approve CUP 2025-05 for a daycare center at 300 Diamond Street with the conditions suggested by the staff.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and opposed? And, oh, excuse me, Arnie?
Maybe you should finish that and then I'll ask something else. Yeah, I'm just trying to make a clarification that as proposed, it was 20 students and the 40.
Yeah.
So either you can amend these
Revisions. Oh, as corrected with revisions.
You want to, do we need to read it again or?
or if you can just accept that and then whoever made the second can accept the amendment and then you can go forward with a vote. So
I'm sorry, say that
if
again.
the person making the motion can just say yes, as
Revised.
as revised
Revised.
to 40 students. And as long as the person who made the second to that motion agrees,
Okay.
can't remember who
Okay.
that was.
Okay.
Mary Sue, that's okay? Okay, then you can go forward with a vote for the conditions that you have with 40 students and not the 20.
Right. Yes, as revised conditions for
And I
40
sec-
students.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed, and the motion carries unanimously. Congratulations. Thank you so much. And you'll move on. Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda, zoning ordinance amendment 2025-04, a request by Francesco Benincasa to amend the zoning ordinance to allow internally illuminated canopy signs in the C1 and C2 zoning districts. Arnie, can we have a staff report?
Indeed, and this is going to take a little bit of an explanation. Currently, we do not allow internally illuminated signs in the C1 zoning district, except for 3 square foot neon sign, and that's something we added in the 2017 zoning ordinance update. And an aside to that, I did not take that to the ARB, and they weren't happy with me when they found out that it was approved in the overall thing. So that's an aside that we'll get to in a minute. So what they would like to do is, and that's the sort of desired sign, page 27, the first photograph there, simulation, where they have a canopy over the front door to the Gin Hotel. And mind you, the R.E. Lee part's already removed, and you'll see that in the photograph later on. But they would like to have individual letters on top of the canopy that are internally illuminated. And again, it's the internally illuminated thing that we really don't allow except for the neon sign. So therefore, there was a request by the property owners through their applicant to change our code to allow internally illuminated letters that are 10 inches tall for a canopy sign no greater than 5 square feet in size. They either saw or visited or somehow came across this Ramble location that's at the bottom of the page as their inspiration. So we included that in your packet as well. So what you're really considering is, should the ordinance be amended to allow internally illuminated signs to be installed on top of canopies? So over on the next page, this is our current language that we have in the C1 zoning district in chapter 13, where all of our, that says SI standards at the top. Those are actually sign standards. We're not sign. Mistake on our part. Even though sometimes it can be a big sigh to work with signage. So internally illuminated there, you'll see that it's not permitted except for one neon window sign, not more than 3 square feet. And there's a little footnote there that we didn't give you in that one, but on the next page, it says such signs shall not flash and shall be on only during posted hours of business. So that's currently what we have for internally illuminated signs in the C1 zoning district only. Again, C1's downtown proper. And the definitions we currently have in the definition section, which is Article 20, is sign, comma, awning, and it says conveniently C sign, comma, canopy. So we go down to sign, comma, canopy, and you have that definition in those graphics. And then our staff recommendation, of course, is to consider this. And then going on over to the next page. So if we want to go forward with the applicant's request, how do we have to change the ordinance? So that those items in red are what we have to change. So because we have this sort of convoluted awning definition that says C canopy sign definition, and we only have really the one definition for the two things, we obviously have to split those two things out. So we changed with a striking through over on page 29 again in that chart or that table, striking canopy and creating that or leaving that as awning. So an awning sign is permitted with letters not more than 6 inches high and no taller than 8 feet. So 8 feet off the ground. Most canopies aren't more than that. So
Where is that?
sorry, not
Where is that?
I'm
Oh, you
reading through on the chart there. So pretty much in the middle of the chart.
Right here where it says no less than 9, is that what you're referring
Correct.
to? 9 feet.
So we're changing that to an awning only. So if you think of a typical awning and it has that valance,
Yeah.
even if it's not on the valance, it's only 6 inch tall letter that we're allowing. If it's on the valance or if it's on the awning itself, on the angled portion, that's fine. And as long as the sign is not more than 6 feet off the ground or 6 feet off the, not 6 feet, 9 feet off of grade, that's what that last part is about height.
Okay.
So that would then become the awning portion, and then we would insert this new section for canopy. It would be permitted letters not more than 10 inches high and a sign area not more than 5 square feet and not more than 20 feet max above grade level. All this is also for your consideration, but also for adjustment if needed. And then going down to the internally illuminated, because currently they're not permitted except for one neon window sign, not more than 3 square feet, comma, we would then add and one canopy sign. So that is in essence what the proposal is. And then if we go over to page 30, since we wanted to treat the C1 zoning district, which is downtown proper, somewhat similarly to the C2 zoning district, and C2 zoning district is out East Nelson Street, generally from the Advanced Auto out to Sheets. Going out South Main, it is that area from the firehouse all the way out to the, not Ramada Inn, but the Econo Lodge, just to give you an idea where those zoning districts are presently located. Because that's more the suburban style, we always give them a little bit more. So we went from 10-inch tall letters to a 15-inch tall letter, and from a 5 square foot sign to a 10 square foot sign, just as an example. We would have to change the definitions. So sign comma awning would be a sign placed directly on or attached to the surface of an awning. And then we would add that new graphic in. That's why it's got the red underline to show folks what an awning sign would look like or should be. And then for sign comma canopy, we get rid of that first part and put the new language in: a sign placed directly on or attached to the surface or top of a canopy. Canopy sign cannot be attached to an awning, marquee, vehicle fueling station, canopy, or pitched roof structure. And then we have that new graphic for canopy sign, and then we would delete the old graphic. That's why it has the red line through it. It's kind of odd, but that's why the red
Oh,
line
I see.
is
I
going
wondered what
straight
that red
through.
line was. Okay.
And then to further sort of put a little bit color on the second sentence in there, a canopy sign cannot be attached to an awning, obviously, because you want to make the distinction between the awning and canopy. But then the marquee and also the vehicle fueling station or pitched roof. So I'm going to go through the photographs and explain that. On page 32, you have the picture of the current frontage of the building. You see the main entrance for the hotel, and above that is where the canopy is currently located. So that's where the sign would be, or the canopy letters would be placed on top of that canopy. So that's the location. Kate and I took a walk around trying to figure out, okay, what's the impact of this? How many other canopies do we have in downtown? So we went by State Theater, has that canopy that you see there. Going over the next page, Nico's Grill had a canopy that never really occurred to me, but that's a canopy. Your other potential is the one that John Abson had approved through the ARB. And now you're looking at Washington Street side of the Grands building, which is a blank wall completely. But because of the way the grade goes down and internally there's half levels, so he can cut in a new retail storefront from Washington Street side again, where it's just a blank wall right now. And he's proposing a canopy and has already gotten a canopy approved. Or sorry, there were so many things that were approved and some things are still left to be final decision, but I think the canopy was a final approval. So that's a potential to have one there. The next page for the Dutch Inn, that's actually an angled roof. It's a very shallow pitch angle. So to make that distinction in the definition, we did say that it's not allowed on a pitched roof structure. So therefore it would not, this type of lettering would not be allowed on the pitched roof structure for the Dutch Inn. Similar sort of thought process for Stop In, that really odd roof structure, which I never realized was so odd until I took a photograph of it. Again, trying to figure out where these things can be allowed and where they perhaps shouldn't be. So that's why we also wrote in for your consideration is that you cannot have one of these on a vehicle fueling station canopy, because that's what that is for the Stop In location. And then for fun, we just threw in the C2 zoning district sheets, they have canopy signs above each of their 3 entry doors, and I never really realized that, but they have them, and they must have been approved legally when they were approved, however many years ago. And going back to a statement early on, because I didn't take the neon signs to the ARB, I thought it best to go ahead and take this particular proposal to the ARB because in the C1 zone district, they're going to see this when it comes forward. So just as a proposal, we took it to them to sort of see if it's something that they would recommend to you, if that would be helpful to have that recommendation from the ARB. And overall, they were not terribly in favor for this newer type of sign because it, in their opinion, didn't really fit in that well. And they were also somewhat worried that there wouldn't be a distinction once they let one in on a canopy, even though they do have a case by case basis. They were worried that once they allowed one, they really couldn't say no to the next one. And they were worried about proliferation. So that we have the minutes from the meeting on page 36. Again, just reaching out to the ARB to see what their review or recommendation would be. And you have that there.
Mhm.
Mhm. And I think that's it for me. Happy to answer any questions.
Are there anybody?
I have a question, Arnie. Is the table that specifies the size of the signage, is that something that staff put together, or is that the recommendation from the applicant?
Actually work together. What we don't do, and what I should have mentioned perhaps, is that if somebody's going to propose an amendment, we're not going to, if they say we want 10-inch tall letters, staff go figure it out, we're not going to do that work for them. We at least require the applicant to provide something. And Mr. Taylor did do that, and there was a little bit of back and forth, but his proposal was solid, so it wasn't actually that much back and forth. And that what really helped was sort of distinguishing between awning and canopy. So it is a little bit of a collaboration, but primarily from the applicant, a request.
Can you help me understand then why you all together collaboratively decided that an awning lettering should be or is appropriately smaller than than a canopy illuminated signage?
I'm not sure that was particularly taken into consideration in, I mean, it from this standpoint, that 6-inch lettering for the awning was already in the code.
Yeah.
So the applicant's client is asking for 10-inch letters.
Okay.
So if you all take those two things into consideration and want to make them more even or make some adjustment to that, you certainly have that right. But that's sort of what we had in the code and what the request is.
Okay, that answers all my questions.
Very good question. Very good question. Anybody else have any questions?
I would like to understand the Robert E. Lee has been taken off, right?
If we look.
Yeah, and I saw the picture.
Okay, yep.
So was there any consideration of putting the gin? Is because it's allowed to be illuminated like the Robert E. Lee, putting that where the Robert E. Lee was and rather than on top of the canopy or?
I will say this, we've had a number of communications with the owner before Mr. Taylor actually being brought into this about how to address their desire. And I had suggested, well, if you just take out R.E. Lee and put the gin in that same, but that wasn't sort of the aesthetic that they were going for. And they sort of preferred this other type of sign.
So the Robert E. Lee was lit, internally lit, correct?
And also you'll see hotel on the right-hand side. And I'm sorry, I'm on page 32, the left-hand photograph that represents current conditions.
Ah, yes.
In that canopy, there was somehow the metal was cut out. There was some sort of clear plastic behind that and a light bulb of some sort behind that. So I'm not sure if there were 3 different light bulbs or however many, but the hotel part on the right, and I think there's also a hotel written on the left, those will remain.
I see.
But the R.E. Lee part or Robert E. Lee part, I did allow them, whatever the square footage of that is, they could take that and put the gin in there and be perfectly fine. Even though we don't allow that type of internally illuminated sign, it's something that they had, and as long as they stayed within the size requirements, they could do that. They just prefer not to do that.
Gotcha.
I think it's also a little bit complicated with the construction of that canopy and doing that metal work. I think it wasn't easy.
And how high is that sign? It doesn't look that high. It doesn't look like it's 20 feet. I'm wondering why on under the height above grade. It's a 20-foot max above grade level.
I'm not
Why?
remembering exactly, but I think it was because of the State Theater. So again, on page 32, because of the slope of the street there, on the right-hand side, you'll notice that canopy is a good bit further off the ground. Even though I don't really recall actually measuring that. But I think it was just sort of an accommodation for if we wanted to allow them that to make sure that the other canopies currently in existence would have the ability to have a sign.
And how high is this canopy on the Rockbridge building, out of curiosity?
Oh, I cannot
I can't read it. It looks like it might have a measurement on there, but I cannot read it.
It's not listed there. I think it is.
It's not, you think at the highest point, rather, it's
Well,
not 20?
Lowest.
Yes, I see. Yep. Yeah, it doesn't, well, I can't read
I
it.
can't
Okay.
read it either. Sorry.
Okay. Let's see if I have any. So in terms of what we are considering here, we can say, we could, for example, strike dealing with C2 entirely. Is that correct?
Your recommendation can be what you like it to be.
I see.
Recommendation can be not to go forward with this, that these are inappropriate, or however you want to say it, or to split out C1 from C2, change size, change letter, change definition, however you'd like to go forward. And there's also the ability, not that we want to take too much time with this, but if you wanted additional information or if you wanted additional time, you could certainly postpone the public hearing to your next meeting to continue the discussion if you like.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions, further questions for Arnie?
Would the letters be a neon type lettering, or is it like amber color lighting, or?
Do you think of just
kind
a 3D letter,
But the
letter?
white bulbs being like really bright LED, or not necessarily, like more muted
It's going to
amber?
be an LED and it's going to have some sort of clear-ish face, maybe with a color to it. But we have not talked about sort of lumens and all that, and I don't have a lumen meter that's accurate. So I do have the ability, just to make you aware, that if a light is too bright, in my estimation, I can ask them to turn it down. Hopefully these LED things can be sort of adjusted one way or the other, but we haven't talked about lumens. We haven't talked about color or anything. So all of that, if you don't make a further limitation on it, then all of that's in play for the applicant to do if these are approved.
Do you know, and I think that we would actually really need to know about lumens and make a requirement about how bright it could be, because I think that could become quite problematic. How high is the current awning, the lettering, like the hotel?
I did not measure that, so I do not know that.
It certainly looks like it must be at least 6 inches.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were asking the height off the ground. So no, the current lettering in the canopy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine it's any more than that, or somewhere very close to that.
Around 6 inches. So then what we're showing in the desired sign on 27 is something looks like it's much higher than 10 inches.
And I'm not sure how much you can sort of take that into account just as far as sort of positioning that electronically on there.
Yeah.
But just as an example, if you took a 10-inch tall sign, so 10 inches is there,
Okay.
and you did 6 feet, just from that end to here, and I think I was here. So that is roughly what you're looking at under the current proposal. 10-inch tall letter. I think I'm somewhat accurate somewhere in here.
So a little bit
That
lower.
length.
Yep. Okay.
Perhaps on 27, as you were pointing out, it seems like the design is maybe not quite to scale.
I
Maybe
think
maybe
that's
the
fair.
Ramble one is a little bit closer to what you would actually visualize.
Yes, that
Um,
looks like that to me too. Okay, so if we don't have any further questions for Arnie? Yep, okay. So let's move on to an applicant statement. Do you have if you'll come up, state your name and address for the record, please.
Thank you. My name's Lee Taylor. My address is 401 Lime Kiln Road. I'm here on behalf of Francesco Benincasa and the owners of the Gin Hotel. And as Mr. Glazer said, I've been working with Mr. Benincasa for some time, and I think that they have been working with Mr. Glazer and Ms. Beard for quite some time before I became involved. And they've been trying to find a way to architecturally and historically appropriate to the age of that building, come up with a new sign. As you have observed, the old sign has been removed. It was, I think it's a copper or bronze metal facing around the canopy that has the lettering cut out. So it was manufactured at the time the building was installed in the 1920s, and trying to retool that to allow the sign in that same location is really, I think, economically impractical. And I think that the lettering that has been proposed is, from the historical photographs that we have of that building, is really in keeping with the era in which that building, I think it was 1927, that building was actually constructed. You're very observant to notice that the lettering on page 27 is not to scale. That was an early draft of the proposal. There is a much more recent draft. I don't think that was provided to Mr. Glazer, and I apologize for that. But this one is more, and I'm not going to say it's exactly accurate to scale, but this is a 10-inch high letter according to the sign designer. So to submit that for your review. However, at this point, we're not doing a sign application. We're simply asking that the commission consider the proposal to allow a sign of this sort, and whatever the commission decides, we'll go back and figure out how to come up with a sign that's going to work with whatever you and the city council come up with. The lettering that has been proposed is, I think, they're 10-inch high letters, and the length of the sign is fairly small. And I think that you can see from the photograph that's being passed around now is really much more consistent with the size of the building and the canopy. I think that Mr. Glazer has done an excellent job of summarizing the process that we've been through. We certainly want to make sure that whatever is permitted would be tasteful and not too bright. And I think that certainly some sort of a standard for lumens would be appropriate. And my observation is that with a 5 square foot area, that's a pretty small sign when you get it up on top of a building. And there are not many, even of the canopies that are shown in the photographs, where I can imagine a property owner really wanting to do that. So I just don't think there are many locations in the city, certainly in the C1 district, that this type of sign is going to proliferate. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I thank you for your consideration, and be glad to And Mr. Benincasa is not here. His sister Pino's here in his stead today. So,
Thank
so
you.
anything that I'm not able to answer, I'll turn to her.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Does anybody have any questions? Um, did you have a question?
I do. Is your intention, is the applicant's intention to advertise the name of this building to people on the sidewalk?
Well, I think it is difficult at present uh, for folks trying to find the hotel at night to locate it because there's no lighted sign, and often people will come and try to check into a hotel after dark. And, obviously with your GPS on your phone, it's going to take you pretty close to where it is, but it's nice to have, especially for a hotel, something that would allow you to see, oh, there it is. Folks like me that have poor eyesight and don't know how to use GPS very well. I think it would be beneficial to them.
My concern would be that given the narrowness of Main Street and the narrowness of the sidewalks especially on either side, really, and the depth of that awning, the depth of that canopy, that sign, an illuminated sign on the front of the canopy will only be visible to the folks on the other side of the street and not to passersby in a vehicle. I see most of the signs that on businesses on Main Street are those hanging signs
Mhm.
perpendicular to the buildings, which makes them very readable on the narrowness of the street. I think that's the reason that folks pick that option. And I just wonder how effective it would be.
Well, that's a very good question, and I would simply pose that to Mr. Benincasa, but for example, the old sign that's shown at the bottom there, Robert E. Lee, my memory is that it was visible from the street, and I think what they're talking about is just above that location. So I think it would be adequately visible for someone like me to find the hotel and check in.
And have they considered having a neon sign, which is allowed inside of it has to be inside the
But
window?
neon signs are only for businesses to put in their window that indicate that they are open and
Mhm.
only during business hours. And correct me if I'm mistaken about that, Mr.
It
Glazer.
just says, internally illuminated signs are not permitted except for one neon window sign, not more than 3 square feet. But it doesn't say anything unless there's something more to it. It doesn't say anything about what the content of that neon has to
Right.
be.
We very typically, or maybe only so far, have had requests for open signs. That seems to be by far the most popular one, but the content is certainly not something, but they clearly wanted something out on the canopy and not in the window. So we did talk early on, many years ago now, I think, about neon and where they could put one in the window or further back, but that was not really addressing what they ultimately wanted, which was something out on the canopy to replace the old name with something newer.
Right. And currently we do have the hotel signs.
Well, I think the hotel signs are on the end of the canopy remaining, and I believe there's a small plaque now on the wall that is not illuminated. So at nighttime, there's no indication of where the
Yeah,
hotel
I
is.
don't see that in this photo,
I
but
think it's on the left hand, maybe the left and right side there. You see the little black, one's a
I
square,
do.
one's a rectangle. That's the only signage, I
it
believe,
looks like it's
that is.
got a number 30. Is that the right address?
Yeah, so I'm looking just over here to the left and right
Ah.
of the door. It's the little black square rectangle.
Okay, thank you. And to Charlie's point, the hotel would be visible from the street. Driving down the street, that's what you would
Correct.
be able to see regardless of whether it's this sign or replacing the Robert E. Lee inside of the canopy. So,
To answer the question about the height of the canopy, this canopy, according to my, again, poor engineering abilities, is about 12 feet from the sidewalk at the building. And I walked out to the sidewalk and I'm guessing it's about 12 inches of fall on the sidewalk there. So I would venture a guess that it's well below 15 feet.
Okay.
From the sidewalk to
Right.
the canopy at the greatest distance.
and do you know how high those letters are?
These letters, there was, I
The
think I
existing
did,
letters.
I believe I have an early draft from the sign company that, if you'll give me a minute
Sure.
to, you're asking about the letters on
The
page
letters of
27?
hotel, the letters of hotel and the letters of Robert E. Lee.
They're 8 inches.
I'm sorry? 6 inches? Thank you. All right, and was there a reason why you chose 20 feet above the grade level?
Well,
For the
I think
height.
that was again, in order for other and I think if we said 12 and a half feet, it would probably be okay with the applicant, but I don't know that we're trying to draft things so narrowly that this would be the only location in the city that a sign like this would be permitted. Maybe we should say that it could be only exactly 12 and a half feet off the grade.
We're all like, really? Is he serious? Okay. Does anybody have any further questions for Mr. Taylor? Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so I will open the floor for public comment. If there's anybody in our audience who would like to make a public comment on this issue, and there are not, so I'm going to close that and open the commission discussion section. So, any thoughts?
I think it would look nice. It was already lit up previously. I don't think that I'm trying to think if I was across the street, if that light would be frustrating, but if it's during business hours only.
I can make one clarification there. A hotel's pretty much 24/7. So this isn't going to unless there's tweaking, I would, if you're a restaurant, your neon open sign while you have customers, maybe while you're washing dishes too. But once you're closed, that should go off. I think you could argue a hotel is open 24/7 and therefore it wouldn't necessarily, unless you tweak it 2 hours of hours of signage or something else.
But that we could do that. We could certainly specify a reasonable range of hours.
Yeah, as long as this isn't a conditional use. So as long as you have a good justification
Right.
for that and can expect an impact from and why it's needed
Right.
to not be on from midnight to 6 a.m. Yes, you definitely have the ability. And it's not unlike some of the other regulations. I'm not sure we have any time regulations specific to signage, but yes, you have the ability to make a recommendation that includes some language about time.
I have a question that's probably more for you, Arnie. I'm curious about why we need to change the entire ordinance on the sign ordinance here, rather than have them come and get a special exception.
There is no special exception and there's no variance. available for this.
Mhm.
So specifically, uses, you get, conditional uses, permitted uses. This isn't a use, this is a sign. So there's nothing in the conditional use permit section.
Mhm.
And then the variances that the way the criteria are written for variances in the state of Virginia, it's almost impossible to issue a variance.
Mhm.
Yes, you can ask for reductions in front yard setbacks. You can ask for, this is a whole different type of sign. So it's not even as though we allow a 5-inch tall sign and they want to go to 6, so it's not a variance in that respect. But because the criteria are difficult in Virginia, as an example, one of them is you can issue a variance, or a variance should be issued if there's no other, if the regulations make it so that you cannot have any use of the property. Well, clearly they have a 10-story hotel on their property. They have use of the property, so that's not an issue. So this, it would not fit the criteria
Okay.
for requesting a variance to not go through this process. So the only way for us to allow this type of sign, or to consider allowing this type of sign, is to go through an amendment to the existing ordinance.
I have to say, I'm a little concerned about making a change, particularly in the face of the Architectural Review Board's comments. I mean, that struck me that they were all concerned about the, that you're sort of opening the door. And I know that there are not that many right now, but there are, I mean, there was one more that I saw in my Google Drive around town on the building right below, right down the street from Artists in Cahoots. That appears to have what I would say is a canopy.
Miss one? Okay.
So they could be found, they could, if this was permitted to be a taller and lit sign, there's then the question about, is that fair for the people who only have awnings? Honestly, I'm not quite sure how we could have awnings have lit signs on them. I see that that's in this in the sign on page 29, awnings says that it's permitted, but it seems like it should not be permitted. So if you have an awning, which is most of them, I don't know how you could have a lit sign on an awning.
Certainly not the intent. So I'm not following where you're maybe finding that an awning can, so the second column of number.
Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? No, never mind. Scratch that part.
Okay.
But regardless, it's still, there's not sort of parity between businesses, to have some businesses have a 10-inch lit sign. And I know that we've got the Southern Inn. Southern Inn has their sign. But it does, I don't know, it just seems sort of like there are some issues that feel pretty substantial and outside, and we're being asked to do this outside of sort of a more thorough review of signs in town. And I almost feel like, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to drone on here, but I almost feel like because the thing about Lexington is that it's got this lovely character, right? That the Architectural Review Board should be part of this conversation, like maybe a work session with us if we were going to actually look at this in sort of a more thorough way, rather than sort of in a response to a request from a business. I do also, I would say that the business does have a remedy, and the remedy is to use the existing canopy. So it's not like they're not going to have a sign. It's been that way since the 1920s. And if you're looking for something that's more that goes with the building, then it seems like just changing the sign to what using the same format for the sign that was original seems like it would be more appropriate than an LED sign. So, okay, I'm going to stop talking now, but those are my thoughts.
And the other, to piggyback on what you said, Shannon, what Charlie's remark and, was that those signs that hang down are a nice option, and that's totally allowed. So,
Yeah, although not lit.
are they not lit? Are they not allowed to be lit? The ones that hang down on the side?
The ones that, perpendicular or hanging sign, projecting signs, what we call it.
Projecting, okay.
To me, they can all be externally illuminated. So
Mhm.
in the downtown historic district, you wouldn't want internally illuminated signs. That's a newer type of signage, generally speaking.
Right.
So it's perfectly fine to have them,
Right.
as long as they get the ARB to approve the lighting as well as the sign and the bracket, they can be externally illuminated.
So there are remedies, like you said, Shannon.
I just want to make sure I understand, like from a governance point of view, we can respectfully take the ARB's comments under advisement, but there's no sort of rule of deference to the judgments they've expressed on this for this body, right?
Correct. We just thought,
Yeah.
to keep me out of hot water again.
Yeah,
Also to provide, because they are
Totally,
gonna be the
absolutely.
ultimate arbitrators of what it looks like.
Right.
Not so much size and
Right.
type of sign, but once it's in the code. So I thought it'd be helpful to at least get that opinion from them.
agreed.
For your consideration.
absolutely. I think it is very helpful, and hearing the views that they've expressed is very helpful. Do I understand correctly that any particular sign would have to go, that falls under any changes we make, would have to go back to them? No, right?
no,
This would just open that. I didn't think so, but then I thought something you just said implied that, but I misunderstood.
And, because I started immediately thinking about their process, but
Yeah.
no, you, an application for a code amendment starts here.
Right.
And then
Goes to city
it makes
council.
your recommendation, whatever your recommendation may be, to not allow it, to leave it as it's proposed, to
Mhm.
change it, however you want to go forward, that
Mhm.
recommendation goes forward to council.
Right.
Now, council in their review of this could say, what about lumens? What about something else?
Right.
And send it back for your interpretation
Right.
of that, or further review of whatever that specific point is. But unless they tell me to go back to the ARB with something
Mhm.
different to get
Right.
there, I think we have, just from an aesthetic sort of standpoint, ARB's opinion is what theirs is, which has already been
Right.
stated.
And then for any particular sign that would be if the rules were changed and it went from us to city council, imagine, say, that we adopted these changes as written and then city council approved that, then it's essentially open after that point. There's no other review process that ARB would be involved, because as you said before, it's not a conditional use, so it's not coming to us because it's not a use at all definitionally.
Right. The process at that point is for, once the rules are changed, is for the applicant to then come in for a sign permit application that would go to the architectural review board to actually put these letters on top of that canopy. But nothing else for the ARB as far as review of code language.
Right. Okay. No, yeah, that's what I'm trying to ask. I'm sorry that
Okay.
I'm expressing it in such an unclear way. That's it, right? So they would get another look at particular signs.
Any
Yeah.
kind, sorry
Right.
for not understanding. I
Yeah,
thought we
yeah.
were still talking about sort of the process.
Yeah,
of
no, I
this
get it.
Code
Yeah,
amendment.
yeah.
But the ARB on a biweekly basis reviews a lot of signs.
Right.
Well, I don't want to overstate it, it's Lexington, but they review signs. So
Right.
if my wife takes her sign that was approved in her past location,
Mm-hmm.
takes it to her new location, it's got to go back to the
Mhm.
ARB.
Right.
Any new canopy sign, if allowed in whatever format, will have to go to the ARB.
Mhm.
What I would tell them is it meets the size requirements, the
Mhm.
square footage requirements for that type of building, because it is a canopy.
Mhm.
And then I step back and let them make the aesthetic
Mhm.
decision of whether or not it's appropriate beyond, it's an internally illuminated sign, 10 inches in height, it's less than 5 square feet.
Okay, and I apologize for so many process questions. When I presume when they make those judgments, they're just as we, when when making a judgment about a conditional use permit, there's certain criteria in relation to which we're supposed to make. Do they have a similar set of?
It's not as set in stone. In other words, conditional use permit, you have those 5 things really that you're
Yeah, right.
grading every single one that you just saw in the last one.
Right.
They have a well-formed set of design guidelines.
Yeah.
We were able to get a grant a few years back, and they have a booklet about yay big for design guidelines that are lovely, are they not? And so that doesn't say absolute, but when you're considering a sign, consider these things. When you're
Mm.
considering windows, new windows, consider these
Yeah, yeah.
things.
Yeah.
So it's not a hard and fast, but they do have design guidelines for everything in the historic districts.
Thank you.
Other thoughts?
I agree with you, Shannon, that changing of the ordinance is a big deal. And I'd like to see, I'd be more comfortable considering a change if there had been a study that, that justified the 10-inch, for example. You know, awnings get their 6 inches. Why not 8 inches for canopies? Why not 12? Why 10? And just be more comfortable with something like that.
Right.
To change in the ordinance.
Okay. I also, I'm not opposed to, taking this up, putting this on our hit list of things to think about for the future. In terms of, a review of this ordinance, a sign ordinance review. I'm not opposed to that at some point. But I would like to have, sort of more time and be able to look at other communities' ordinances and see what they look like, and just that. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
I mean, I'm sort of tentatively but somewhat positively disposed towards this idea. I think the points others are making are quite reasonable about wanting it to be sort of systematic and not tailored to the needs of a particular establishment, which I think was the spirit in which sort of these changes were written. This is why we get something like a 20-foot maximum above grade level rather than 12.5, right? Is precisely because it was not meant to apply to only one business, but to broaden regulations slightly. And so we've heard from our colleagues on ARB some concerns about proliferation, right, that don't seem to be necessarily specific to this case. And it sounds like some of us feel, quite understandably, like there's a lot to consider here that we haven't thought through yet, the lumens question and other things. But I wouldn't be averse to, further discussion of this, somewhat expeditious further discussion of this. That is not sort of postponing indefinitely, but for some.
So John, are you suggesting just tabling this, or are you suggesting that we put this on our list of topics to consider?
Yeah. I'm not suggesting sort of tabling it actually, but that
I mean, tabling it for next meeting.
like maybe considering, would we want to, I'm proposing that we might want to consider taking it up again at the next meeting, discussing it further if others agree.
I just weigh in on a couple of
course,
procedural
yeah.
elements.
Yeah.
First of all, this is an advertised public hearing.
Right.
So that I don't lose the advertisement, have to re-advertise. If you're going to defer, please defer to a date certain.
Okay.
If that is your next meeting, that's perfectly fine. I'm hearing a couple of things. I want to make sure that I'm understanding it. We have to respond to a request when it's submitted within, I think it's 100 days.
Yeah.
So there isn't this ability to just table this until we look at
Right.
a number of different ordinances and take what is typically our time frame is 6 months to 9 months for something more involved than perhaps signs. But once you get into signs, it's hard to tweak them without affecting something somewhere else, but that's just an observation. So the applicant has put in a request. You need to consider that request at a maximum of 100 days. I would certainly think this could be done less time than that. So if there is a deep concern that you cannot make a recommendation on the proposal without having a much more thorough review, my suggestion for you would be to send up a recommendation for denial because you need that additional review, and then we can take it up. The applicant does have the right, if you will, or expectation that within a certain period of time, you need to make a recommendation. And that's actually in state code. I hope that's helpful.
So are there other folks? So it sounds like John is interested in at least considering continuing this at our next meeting or so. I would say I'm more comfortable rejecting this because there are many things about this that I think we would need to consider, including 20 feet and, how tall how tall the sign letters are, whether there's a design of specific, size of lettering or how bright they can be, certainly. I think there's a lot to chew on in this. So it sounds like we've got two different, so I'm curious about where the rest of us are.
I'm with you.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the sign ordinance would have to be really discussed and looked at more closely, or just like what you said. Mhm.
I agree. Okay, Krista.
I'm probably more with John, but I think I wouldn't want to have it get stuck behind like red tape and red tape and red tape and red tape. And also I part of it feels like the argument of like, it's the gateway sign of like, now everyone's going to put this sign up. And that has not necessarily always been the case when it comes to those fears and concerns around gateway things. So those are my thoughts. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I will to just speak to what we heard from the Architectural Review Board. I'm going to guess that I'm not sure how long you've lived here, but
3 years.
3 years. Okay. So maybe none of you remember when we had a lot of signs, a lot of neon signs, not even neon, just internally lit signs, particularly on 60. And it was really not so nice. So I think that's where the Architectural Review Board is coming from, is that we're sort of they have worked, the city has worked, downtown Lexington has worked really hard to have a flavor here. And the flavor is, frankly, not internally lit signs. And I think so that's my, it speaks very, very loudly to me. So it sounds like we need a motion from one side or the other. We're all paging through. What page is the
It's not in there. I don't see it.
Other one.
I don't think it's in there.
I would, doesn't,
Oh, sorry.
doesn't make sense for me to go.
I'm looking.
I don't have the votes.
Can you wing it, somebody?
I move to deny this request for the illuminated sign. I should say the proposed zoning ordinance amendment number 2025-04 for canopy signs at this time.
Do we have a second?
I would second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Do we want a roll call vote? Do we need a roll call vote?
Mhm.
Want to hold up your
Aye.
hands? All in favor, raise your hand. So and opposed? That's 2. Okay, so motion was denied. So that recommendation, the motion carried. And so the recommendation is going to be to City Council to deny. But thank you so much for your time. And I think that it is entirely reasonable that we will pick this topic up again, but I I do think that, that involving the Architectural Review Board in that discussion is going to make it a lot more effective. In terms of having this body say, okay, the Architectural Review Board who thinks about these issues in a very different way and in a way that the city, sort of capitalizes on this sort of historic features of our town. I think it'll just be better to have them involved in the discussion if they're willing. So thank you so much. Okay, moving on to review of the governance chapter of the comprehensive plan. So I'm just gonna go through these, and if anybody I'm not gonna cover the ones that have already been shaded in as ongoing, but I will go through the other ones one by one. So the first one is under accessibility and diversity. Ensure Lexington's leadership is available to and representative of all city residents. Geo 1.1, actively foster diversity in recruiting and appointments to boards and commissions. I don't actually know how, does anybody know anything about that?
Somebody from council would have a better understanding
Yeah.
of that, and Frank making his appointments to boards and whatnot, but I just didn't know that's why we left it
Yeah,
unchecked.
I think that's the right thing to do. Okay, Geo, anybody else know anything? No. Geo 1.2, create a diversity hiring initiative plan for the city and school system workforce. I did take a few minutes and look online on the websites for the city and the police department, and I did not see anything with the word diversity in it. So I'm going to guess that that's appropriate to leave it blank. Unless somebody else knows something that we don't.
There's the Irma Thompson, which is for school hiring of educators of color, which is something, it's not necessarily the government that's doing it or helping with it, but I know have you heard of the Irma Thompson school, educators of color? Yeah, I'm on the board of it. It's to encourage, we work with the school boards of Rockbridge County to try to bring teachers of color into, Rockbridge County. And so it's teachers, it's not school force, or the school system workforce. It's very much specific to teachers. But with this being for government, I'm not sure.
Is that Lexington City Schools as well? Oh, great.
So is that in any way, if I could ask, endorsed by the school? I mean, you're working with them. I'm just wondering if there's sort of some way that it's connected so that we could check this box, because otherwise.
Work with Rebecca Walters. We have yearly meetings with all of the superintendents. They definitely work with it. I think Miss Nava was actually one of the recipients of one of it, which was, I think she put the money directly towards her classroom. It's partially to either help people get their degrees or continuing education for being eligible to become a teacher, because Virginia happens to have very high standards for teachers, or helping, or a teacher who has been in there, they are awarded something, but it's very specific to teachers. I don't know how much they've actually worked with, I don't think city council's involved. I haven't heard Frank or Tom Carroll or anything like that, but I do know that we work with the school system. We've met with Rebecca Walters multiple times.
We're happy to reach out to the school system to see if they have a plan in place.
I think we would, since this is super specific, a diversity hiring initiative plan. I mean, if you're willing to reach out, that would be great. Okay, next item is under citizen engagement. Use innovative techniques, tools, and platforms to engage citizens in decision-making processes. Geo 4.1, experiment with civic engagement techniques to create new opportunities for public participation. I was wondering if this wouldn't count. I mean, having the ability for people to listen in and is there a way for people to participate from, like, could somebody do it, type in a question on there? No, but they can listen.
Technically, yes, but we don't have a policy. The city does not have a policy that allows the hybrid participation.
Got it. But at least they're able to watch.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So I would actually say that that's,
Okay. We'll check that then.
yeah, I would. Next one is GO 4.2, improve the transparency and exchange of information, incorporating comprehensive and contemporary communication strategies to engage residents and increase equity in public participation across generations and demographics. That's such a lovely thing. Do we do that? I wonder about the website, about, that's in terms of contemporary communication strategies. I'm not imagining the city getting on TikTok.
Like, sorry.
So I'm not quite sure what that means.
Yeah, I'm a little bit hesitant there.
Instagram?
So we, for what it's worth, what little I know about that is we do put information out there, but we have a hard time keeping up monitoring. So, and we're really not supposed to have that back and forth on that. And we also have to pay extra to log those comments because that's foilable if it's on. So we have a software, I don't know what it's called, that makes sure that we keep all that information for however long it's required. But I just don't want you to, perhaps, since it says public participation, people are out there making comments about our paving schedule, but we're not actively engaged. Like, here's the notice. If you want to comment, fine. Janie will not delete your comment if it's inappropriate. So it's a little bit of a sticky problem for us to some manner. We're not sort of a business that's selling something, and if we don't like it, then we can remove the comment if it's totally inappropriate, and sometimes that happens. So I'm not sure if that's even helpful mentioning those things, but I'm not sure what we're doing specifically to increase equity across generations and demographics. We're just doing what we have access to, which is some social media, what we have here and other things. So I'm not sure. It's up to you, I guess, to determine whether or not that meets 4.2 or not.
I guess one question would be whether, I mean, we wouldn't mark it completed, but it does seem like putting the information out there.
Well, you're allowing people to come to the meetings. They have an opportunity to speak. How many times do we give them an opportunity to speak? So, and it's in the newspaper. So,
and it's on social media.
Right. So.
Anybody else have thoughts about that? Whether that's something that sounds like it's ongoing? Improvement in transparency and exchange of information. I'm not sure how much more transparent we could get, frankly. This is 100% transparent. Well, I would recommend marking it as ongoing.
And there's always room for improvement. How about that? So
there is always.
I mean, I think as a general matter, this review that we're doing of the comprehensive plan items is a good thing. It's good that we're looking at this. And I think we've got these two categories, ongoing and completed, and we're generally, the sort of pattern we've settled into, in my view, is setting a pretty low bar for what constitutes ongoing.
Yeah.
And I think that's okay as long as we don't trick ourselves in the process. And you know what I mean? So it would, as we continue in future years to review, we might even think about breaking that out into a broader set of categories or something like that there, so that we could measure a little bit more finely how well we think we're doing at different things. Am I making any sense? Because I've no objection at all to saying this is ongoing, but ongoing is a category as we're interpreting it that includes like from
Yes.
very small.
Like as long as ongoing still creates action.
Yeah, exactly.
Beyond it.
Exactly. Rather
Like
than
we did 1%, nice,
checked.
did it.
Exactly.
But like to continue going to the
Right.
full extent.
Exactly. Yeah, because sometimes, and again, I think this process is great and I'm really glad we're doing this. Sometimes there's this sort of soaring language here, which is full of aspiration, and then we're finding little things that allow us to check it. And I think that's good as long as we bear this in mind. Am I making any sense at all?
You're absolutely making sense. And we had originally talked about having 4 columns
Mhm.
that would provide some additional
Mhm.
granularity to this. And I think that next year, perhaps we can
Mhm.
achieve that. Because I agree. I mean, one of the things was, has it been started
Mhm.
as opposed to ongoing?
Right.
And I would certainly put some of these more in the started category as opposed to in the, like whatever, robust.
Right. Exactly.
Right. So this is the first time that this has been done.
Yep. Totally.
So
Yep.
and I think that in future years, what we'll need to do is really look at you know, what this means and like what each one of them means. And it will be probably a more, sorry, I don't mean to
Specific?
much more specific, but also, like some of these are actually things that are pretty easy to say, yes, we're doing that. And some of them are like, well, are we? And who is the we?
Right.
Is that just the planning department? Is that the city council? Is it the police department, the schools? Is it, who is it?
Right.
So there's a lot, there's a lot of granularity that we could get to. And I think that what we want to be able to say is, have we even started it?
Totally. I agree completely. Yeah.
So that was sort of the point of doing this, not that we are checking off and saying we never have to think about that again,
Agreed.
because we should be thinking about all of these things as we go on, unless they are things that can actually be completed, which is not many of them. Any other thoughts on that? Okay, moving on to the last section, management and collaboration. Advance the city's community planning goals through internal coordination and external partnerships. So the first one is maintain and Geo 5.1, maintain and strengthen partnerships, collaboration, and communication between the city and the institutions of higher learning. I certainly feel like we're working on that.
I think I just saw something that the city manager is working on meeting with them, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love Tom Carroll. I think he's great.
Okay, and then skipping down to Geo 5.4, conduct an annual review of accomplishments to implement the comprehensive plan, including recommendations for budget and work plan priorities as part of Planning Commission's annual report to City Council. I sort of think that that's what we're doing right now.
Good. Want to make sure I was on the same page.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. And then the last one is 5.5, support the school board in identifying successful techniques for ensuring all students are successful as defined by measures of best practices. That's something I know nothing about, and I don't know that we would have to talk to the school to see if they're doing that. But if you're going to talk to the schools anyway, maybe you could ask them. Although Krista, you seemed like you were sort of in the know about the schools. Do you have any thoughts on that one?
No, I think that one's hard to actually define as like, how is the government, like how the governance of it, is that supporting it, right? As Lexington City, it's hard to, yeah, I read that one. I was trying to think of anything that could be considered, but it's not necessarily it's not necessarily coming from inside Lexington. It might be like a broader Virginia type thing. But how can we actually, or how are we doing that? I don't think I can't think of anything.
Right. And frankly, I'm not sure who it is who's doing the supporting.
Mhm.
I can't imagine that it's the planning commission, frankly.
Like that would be more like city council
Right.
supporting the school board, which
Exactly.
supports the teachers, yeah.
Yep. All right. So I think we can close that section. I would open it for public comment. However, there's no public here, so open and closed. Do we have a zoning and planning report, Arnie?
We do have a quick one in that we've been tied up a little bit working on a homeowner helper program with Threshold. They're meeting more often now than they have in the past. So not much has been done for the furtherance of the short-term rental zoning text amendment. We still need to have comments from our attorney, and our attorney's office is going to be, I think, well, our main attorney is going to be gone, I know, for a couple of weeks this coming month, or this month that we're now in. So that's going to take a little bit longer before it comes back to you. Just to remind you, we had sort of a run through, not an advertised public hearing yet, so we're still working on the language. And there were a couple or three questions at least, I think, that needed review by the attorney. So that's where that stands. And then the other thing to mention is in your next meeting, there is going to be a comp plan review sort of kickoff meeting. We have engaged the Central Shenandoah Planning District Commission, so our regional PDC, and they have proposed a scope of work that we've accepted. And Jeremy Crute with the PDC will be here at the next meeting for to kick off. This is what we're going to do for the comp plan review that is required or recommended every 5 years. So that will be our sort of start for this comp plan review. Really may not have anything else, so that may be the majority of your meeting at your next meeting.
Great. Well, that's fantastic.
What was the acronym for that again?
CSPDC, so that's the
Yes, PEC.
PDC Planning,
Thank you, planning.
District
Thank
Commission.
you.
Central Shenandoah Planning District Commission. I think they have 5 counties, and we're one of them. We're not a county, but you know what I mean. So we're in their region. We subscribe to them. They provide us with services, but this is going above and beyond what's in our scope for, what our normal subscription, if you will, is. So we are going to be paying them a little extra to do this review. And I don't want to get the cart before the horse, but they're going to go through the data. They're going to put out a survey. We're going to hold. They proposed initially just 1 or 2 public meetings, and we knew that we wanted more. So we added a couple more and had to throw a little bit more money into the pot for that. So that's what he's going to be sort of laying out. This is the process. This is how many times he's going to be in front of you, and what our sort of participation portion of this or responsibilities will be as staff. So that's what we're going to be talking about primarily. Your next meeting will be primarily talking about the comp plan review process.
Great. What are the things that are normally included in our subscription to them?
We ask for assistance on a number of different items. Grant work, as an example, we went through them and they were the grant administrator for the CDBG planning grant that we received for the citywide housing windshield survey.
Mhm.
That they went around and looked at housing conditions from the street, if you will, from the public way.
Mhm.
So they help us with grants. They help us with the grant administration at times. They helped us with the grant also, if I remember correctly, for the design guidelines that the architectural review board has. So we use them in a number of different ways, also on the transportation side, because they do have a transportation
Right.
department. And actually it was bike ped plan.
Right,
They were
yeah.
helpful. They also helped write the transportation chapter
Nice.
in our current comp plan, as an example. And I don't think that was an additional charge, as I recall. So they're helpful in a number of different ways, and also for research for us. We don't have solar facilities and other things that are going on, but
Right.
they're a good resource for smaller localities that need help, that don't have staff to do the research for the things that are coming, such
Great.
as solar facilities, just as an example, or data centers. I don't think we're going to get into those.
Right. Um, and do we have sort of a sense of what this review is going to entail?
I don't want to give it away. We do have a scope of work that we've agreed to. So we do have that and he'll go through not the scope of work, but what our work plan items will be.
Okay. Great. Well, that's fantastic. I'm delighted to hear that. Thank you. All right. Did Leslie send a city council report? Okay, so we will pass that by and we're just looking for a motion to adjourn.
I motion to adjourn.
We have a second? Excellent. All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, and we're closed for business.
Whack that.
Thank